Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Exercise Mechanic. Today we have the pleasure of being joined by Olivia Oneid. Olivia, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure for us as well. We've been high key, as the kids say nowadays, messaging each other on WhatsApp. Really excited about today's conversation. And before we dig in, we just wanted to start off hot with a spicy question.
Okay. Hit
All
me.
right, here we go. Fuck, marry, kill, glute edition. Hip thrust, barbell back squat, Bulgarian split squat.
Kill back squat.
Who are you
Marry
marrying?
probably hip thrusts and fuck Bulgarian split squats.
Nice.
Yeah.
And fucking the Bulgarian because it's like not a long-term commitment.
Yeah. It's just, it's a once in a while kind of thing.
Once in a while, if
Yeah.
you're feeling it, you go hard in
Yeah.
the paint and then, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I've done 4 hip thrusts in my life, so I'm probably marrying the split squat.
Yeah. The hip thrusts are a staple. So they're always in, they're consistent.
Nice. I like it. You know, maybe we can pull on the thread of glute training specifically later on today. But there's something. The second question that I really want to open up with, I know Ryan and I feel the same way about this, is as I was looking to kind of get to know you prior to today, I went on your Instagram, of course, and there's something that stood out to me right on your front page, and it's in your bio, and you wrote, "Helping you become," in quotes, "her, the woman you know you're designed to be." And I personally, I thought that was really interesting. It was like, what does she mean by that? And I was hoping that you could start by perhaps like defining that. Like, what do you mean by her?
So I find that, well, I mean, myself coming from my history with my struggle with finding my identity and who I am as a person and kind of growing into the person that I am today, there was a lot of like comparison going on. And I think a lot of females struggle with that, especially with social media now. So my goal, like with my coaching, is to help you step into like proving to yourself that like you're the standard, right? So that there's no one else to compare yourself to other than your own self, essentially. And just helping women like unleash their power and like see what they're capable of. It is by far like the most rewarding thing for me as a coach, for women to achieve things that like they never even thought were possible or capable of doing for themselves.
Love it. Yeah. So it's about like, how would I say, like really cementing, claiming who you are as a person.
Yeah.
It's about like empowerment. Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. I absolutely love that.
Because that's like nutrition training that made me who I am today and made me so confident with the process that I took to get there and the way that I do things now. And there's not a day where I would change that for the world or compare myself to anyone else or want to be in anyone else's shoes.
Do you mind? Sorry, if you don't mind, Ryan. Do you mind, Olivia? Can you share a little bit of your origin story? Like, what got you into training? Because I mean, you know, if we think about where you are now, you just got your pro card, which congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Just got your pro card. It was a few months ago, right? But that's a huge accomplishment. I'd be really curious to know where this whole journey started.
Well, I've always been an athlete. I played competitive hockey when I was younger. And that was, I don't want to say my escape. I was a kid, but like that was the funnest part of my life. Like when I think back to all my fun moments growing up, it was playing sports, meeting friends in sports and all that. So I was always had an athletic background. In high school, I took a fitness class. It was kind of, I guess, like an intro to kinesiology going into university. And I just bonded really well with the teacher. And I kind of got into that, like, I want to impress her. I want her to think that I'm the best. And that's my like perfectionist. Like I want to be above average. I don't want to just be in the middle of the pack. So I think that kind of started my competitive mentality and always just wanting to be better than other people and better than average and not mediocre. And then I started off kind of with like running and wanting to be smaller. That was in back then. And then I found like a powerlifting bodybuilding gym, got into strength training. Then I found CrossFit. Then that brought me into Olympic weightlifting. Then I competed in powerlifting, and then I kind of fell into bodybuilding. And this is where I'm here to stay now.
You sure you're not going to go back to running?
I honestly, I might sometimes, like the odd day I'll get a craving. I'll get a craving to go running. Running is great. Like to just like clear your mind and spend some time with yourself. It's meditative. Once you get past the shin splints and the sore knees, it's great.
It's always a funny contrast with ET and myself. I also was in powerlifting before I got into bodybuilding. I don't think I've been sub 200 pounds since I was like 21. Mm-hmm. ET ran one marathon for sure. Are you at 2 now?
No, just one. Yeah.
Just one. And then he's doing like a 51-kilometer trail run this year as well. So like couldn't be further apart. Like I walked to my mailbox and like dying.
Makes for interesting conversations though, and truly, and like kind of like looking at, I'm sure you've noticed this as well, Olivia, how like superficially things can be so different, but then if you start peeling back the layers at the foundation, a lot of these different sports and disciplines leverage very similar principles. They just kind of manifest differently depending on the context.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think all of those sports shaped me into the athlete that I am now, and definitely taught me a lot about discipline, like Olympic weightlifting, especially like staying the course when things don't go your way. Like that was a hard lesson.
Something I wanted to pull on a little bit here, because I knew you had a strength training background before powerlifting. And, I think we've seen this a lot, especially with female athletes in particular within like bikini and wellness. Sometimes, in my opinion, there isn't enough of an emphasis on progressive overload, training compounds, etc. And I know because we train at the same gym, that's very much a big part of your training plan. Yeah. And I would probably argue a big part of your development. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about like that level of emphasis and maybe how that background has shaped like your training style now.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of, I would say more so bikini athletes, I guess some like amateur wellness will focus so much on isolation work. And I don't know where that's coming from in terms of they think that that's going to specifically bring up that one single muscle anyways. But the training intensity and the effort that's required to actually grow and build, I think a lot of athletes shy away from or don't know how to dig deep and push to that place. And CrossFit especially is definitely the sport that got me comfortable being so uncomfortable and in that dark place. Like, I don't know if either of you have dabbled in any CrossFit or competed in that at all, but like it's similar.
I did a 65-pound snatch once and that's it.
Okay.
And it was terrible.
So
like I do that with one arm, like sit down, Ryan.
Yeah, but it's the effort and intensity is very similar, because even though maybe the weights are lighter, so you're doing a 65-pound snatch, but it's for 5 minutes straight for an AMRAP. It's like when mentally you want to give up, no one cares. Keep going and keep getting more reps, and that's kind of the mentality that I take to my training now.
Hell yeah, I love that. You mentioned something that I think is really interesting. I don't know if we've even ever talked about this on the podcast yet, but it's definitely an observation that I've had, and like I said, I'm really happy you brought it up, which is that learning to like push hard like is very much a skill that like some people perhaps have greater ease at it, but it is something that sometimes people need to like, they need to learn how to go there. Like
Yeah.
perhaps there's a state of mind that can be useful as you're kind of like starting to kind of dip your toes into those waters. There's a state of mind and a place to go cognitively that helps you deal with like the suffering of the moment. And anyways, I'm just really I'm happy that you brought that up because I haven't heard any of our other guests share that with us. And you said that
Okay.
for you it was very much CrossFit that you learned that. And
Yeah.
for your athletes that you work with, like what do you do if you're starting to notice that perhaps it's not necessarily the program per se that's the gap, but it's just there's an effort gap and like they're not getting close enough in terms of like genuinely getting into the like 2 to 5 RAR on a given exercise or what have you. Do you ever push up against that with your clients? And if so, how do you navigate that?
I call them out on their bullshit. I'm like, I'm not going to be nice about it, especially if I have an athlete that voices that they want to put on muscle mass, or they're an athlete and either want to step on stage or want to take their physique to the next level for the next time that they compete. If they're sending me a training video and there's still reps in the tank, I'm like, what is this? Like, if I had a gun to your head, could you do another rep? And they're like, yeah, probably. I'm like, okay, so next week, do that. The same weight, get another 2 or 3 reps. And sometimes like I'll just tell them, because I have a pretty good gauge, especially when I see videos of my athletes over and over of how strong they actually are. If I see a video, I'll be like, add another 20 pounds per side and match reps next week. I know you can. And 9 times out of 10, they'll come back and they'll do it and they'll be like, okay, yeah, you were right. And that hurt.
I think something you said there is really important. We all kind of exist within this online coaching world now. I don't know necessarily about your background, Olivia, but ET and myself both had over a decade working with clients in person. And I would say one of the most important things you can do as a coach is actually get your eyes on your athletes. It's something certainly I would say within my business, like I probably much like you, like I get videos from every training session. And I think sometimes that can be forgotten about just how important it is, whether it be training effort, technique, etc. Can you talk about the importance of actually, as a coach, getting videos from your clients and being able to assess their training sessions?
It's so important. One, for the effort and intensity, because most people have no idea what effort is and they're leaving stuff in the tank. Most people will not catch imbalances or like little things going on with their feet, where their pelvis is, where their hips are, little hip shifts, or just driving the wrong way. Like I had a client that was like, oh, I have knee pain. And she's a bikini competitor. We don't do a ton of like squatting, knee flexion stuff because her quads are good. We don't really want to bring those up anymore. And I'm like, why are you having knee pain? I'm like, you haven't been sending me videos. Can you start sending me videos? Sends me a video. Her hip thrust is like, she's like driving her knees back. And I'm like, okay, that's why. So we changed the machine that she was doing hip thrust on. Knee pain is gone. Right. And little things like that, that an average eye isn't going to catch, but a coach's eye will be like, yeah, that's your issue. Here we go. And sending videos on time and actually keeping up with that is going to prevent you from getting an injury and delaying your progress, because you have to take a step back to fix whatever issue is going on.
What kind of conversation do you have with your athletes at the beginning when it comes to setting expectations?
Like setting their own expectations, or
Setting
my expectations.
Your expectations of like this is what I need to show up for you, and for this to be a successful relationship. Like how do you go about that? And I'm curious, like, do you have any non-negotiables?
Non-negotiable is just check in on time. Like, be an athlete, take this seriously. But in terms of expectations, I only expect that their actions align with what they want. Right. So, say if I have a client that does training with me and they don't really care that much about changing their physique, like I just want to be healthy. I'm just kind of a general lifestyle athlete, and they're fine sending me videos just kind of here and there, like, am I doing this right? And then I let them know, and then they don't send me a video of that again. As long as they're not coming back to me and saying, I haven't made progress, I haven't put on muscle mass, then there's an issue with communication there. But if an athlete's telling me that they want to achieve something, then my only expectation is that you're following exactly what I tell you to do to get to that point.
Love it.
Makes me think of, I'll share this as a quick story. One of my favorite conversations to have with people, as you said, Olivia, is matching behaviors to expectation. And one of my favorite stories of this is I had a guy that I trained for about 5 years or so. And he was like a ex-professional football player. You know, was in his late 50s, early 60s when I trained him. Loved kind of power lifts and being strong, but also wanted to lose some weight. And we sort of had this back and forth conversation for like months and months and months. And eventually I was just like, look, I get that you like having beers 2 or 3 times a week, like after you play hockey and stuff like that. And like when you go out for a beer and wings, like that's not conducive to losing weight. I don't care if you don't want to, like, if you want to do that, but also don't complain that about not losing weight. And I remember he had this moment, he just kind of like took 10 seconds. He's like, well, if I'm going to be a fat guy, I'll just be a strong fat guy. And we literally never talked about diet again. He's just like, all right, I'll just like try to bench 350. I was like, great. And that conversation really changed our like dynamic as a trainer and a client.
Yeah, because I think some people will come to you and say that they have these goals, but once they realize what it takes to get there, some people aren't willing to do those things, and that's okay, right? But when you notice that difference in actions and what you want and what you're saying that you want aren't aligning anymore, then it's time to have a conversation, because I don't want to sound like a broken record every week that I do your check-in of like, okay, I asked you to do this last week and you didn't. Right? Like what's going on here? We've been trying for the last 4, 5, 6 weeks to do this and you still haven't done it. What are we doing here?
Yeah. Early on when I kind of started transitioning from trainer to manager, which is how Ryan and I met, we worked together at the Good Life Queensview. I did a course through Good Life as a means of hopefully helping me deal with conflict. And it was a course called Crucial Conversations. Didn't fucking work at all. I still had a lot of trouble dealing with conflict in a management position. I learned that there's a big difference between learning the theory and then being able to apply it in practice. But I digress. There's a part in that course that stood out to me, which is like, is this a one-off thing? Is this becoming a pattern? And then the next step is, has it compromised the relationship? And for me, that's really important, because you think of, the aspect of that's really important is maintaining the client relationship. Because I mean, you can't help someone if like the alliance, I tend to work with a lot of people with chronic pain, treatment resistant cases. So the language I use is therapeutic alliance. Like if anything that compromises the therapeutic alliance needs to go. That's the one thing that you just cannot compromise ever. Because if you do, like, your ability to, help people is just completely gone. And what I've kind of learned over the years is like, your ability to assess and act quickly, to like notice patterns early. Like, okay, this is a one-off. I'm gonna give you some grace. Maybe it's twice because of the context. Who knows? I'm gonna give you some grace. But like when it starts to become a pattern, it's your responsibility as a coach to step in, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it feels a little bit early, because the next, like down the road, the predictable outcome is that it will compromise the relationship, the alliance, and thus your ability to help them. And if you're thinking of like, I mean, that's why you're there. right? You can't allow that to happen. So I'm happy you guys brought that up.
And I think that, like, all three of us being in the coaching industry for, I don't know how long I've been in, I'd say like 8 years now, maybe not a decade, but those human behaviors and patterns are very repetitive from person to person. And you get better at noticing when they're starting to come, and you're like, oh, there it is. This is probably what's going to happen next, and let's get on top of it now.
No doubt.
I'm going to use this as a segue when we talk about behaviors and actions, because I know ET and I wanted to talk about your process of getting your pro card. There's a phrase that I've heard before that personally I really like, and I wanted to know how applicable this was to you, and if so, how. People talk about you should act like a pro bodybuilder before you get your pro card. Like, all of those behaviors need to be there if you want to be somebody who is a professional bodybuilder. How true is that for you leading up to your pro card?
100%. And not just with the prep itself, but the second I stepped off stage from the previous competition where I didn't get the result that I wanted, just didn't feel happy or confident with how that prep went. The second I got off stage, it was like, okay, if I want to be a pro, I need to act like a pro day in and day out from now until I get that pro card. And I mean, I still act like a pro even though I got my pro card, but now I actually am. Yeah.
Dust it off.
But 100%, absolutely, it's applicable.
So for you, what do those behaviors look like that lead to actually having a pro level physique?
Well, I mean, following through with your intentions and your commitments that you make to yourself every day, not having really like any time off or slacking or like going with the flow of your feelings per se. Like, there's a lot of times where I don't want to get my steps in because I don't feel like it, or I'm not in a good mood, but it's like, what would a pro do in this situation? And just fuck your feelings, get on the treadmill, go for a walk, get your shit done, because this is what pros do. This is what elite athletes do. And if you want to be at that level and get this level of achievement, you have to be checking those boxes every single day.
Yeah, I love that.
For your clients that have that expectation of competing at a high level, because again, if they're human beings, they're probably making missteps, as we all do. How common do you find it? Because I think you and I are both in the bodybuilding world. It feels like nowadays every single person that decides they want to bodybuild, they're working for their pro card. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a lot of times that's just kind of lip service. How often, do you find those people that say, well, I want to be a pro bodybuilder, are they actually doing the things that they need to do? And then if they aren't, how are you stepping in to like manage that to make sure that they're taking the steps necessary?
Well, I mean, a big part of it is having agency over your life and the choices that you're making. So, like, I'm not perfect. I intended to be perfect every single day and act like a pro, but I'm human and I'm not perfect. And when I make those mistakes, as long as I take fault for that, or like take agency over whatever decision that I made and learn from that and apply it to my growth, then it is doing me a service, because I'm learning from that and taking it forward and using it as a lesson. I find I wouldn't even say, maybe some of my athletes initially, before we start to work on that mindset and like teaching them that they have power and control over the choices that they make, there's like, oh, I fucked up this weekend and I ate off plan. And then that's it with their check-in. It's like, okay, well, what happened beforehand? How did you feel going into that choice? How did you feel afterwards? And what are we learning from this, right? Did you want to make that decision? Did you not want to? Like, there's instances where, yeah, on my off season, I'll eat off the plan, but I am in control of that choice and I'm taking full ownership over it. right? So there's no guilt or shame associated with that. So I think it really comes down to agency over your decisions and making sure that you're in control of everything. And that's, I think, a big piece of coaching an athlete from the mindset perspective to be an elite athlete.
I find that so refreshing, and I'm sure listeners will probably feel the same way, because if you look at the package that you brought to get the pro card, you look at that and it's like, like perfection, 100% adherence. And I'm sure your adherence is you're probably more adherent than not. I'm gonna make that assumption.
Yeah,
You're not
like
getting that kind of,
99%.
yeah, you're not getting that physique by eating a bag of Doritos every single evening and being in a hypercaloric state all the time.
Priest method.
It would actually
Right,
be
right.
it would be Miss Vicky's, not Doritos.
Miss Vicky's. Okay,
I'm with
which
you,
kind of
for
Miss
sure.
Vicky's? Yeah.
Probably the OG salt and vinegar.
Yo, me
That is
too, man.
best.
Air high five.
Yeah.
Sick. Yeah, Miss
will-
Vicky's 100%. We don't have any good salt and vinegar chips overseas. I'm in Switzerland, and I hope the Swiss would agree. Their chips over here are terrible in comparison to the standard we have in
Really?
North America. It's quite sad. Yeah, it's quite sad.
I will say, so I was at the Toronto show, and this is something Paul and I had spoken about. ET, I don't know if you've been to a bodybuilding show before, but there are
Just one.
instances where people will step on stage. Sometimes even if you see them backstage, you're like, I don't have to see anybody else. At that show, there were 3 competitors. There was Maya, who won figure, Skylar, who had won the men's bodybuilding, and then yourself, Olivia, where like you walked out and everyone's like, all right, who's second place?
Yeah.
And I do think it's
cool.
this moment. I like that you actually acknowledge that too, but there is this cool moment, because sometimes you're not sure and you're like, people
Well,
are
I'll
kind of
just-
close.
I'll say, like, that's not how I felt on the day of. That's how,
Okay.
like, from my coach telling me, Paul telling me, and coming from my coach, because my coach is very, like, I'm not sugarcoating anything. Like, this is the hard truth. When he said that, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was one of those
That's
moments where, and it is a cool, just as like a fan of bodybuilding, it's cool to watch somebody walk out and you'll be like, this isn't a fucking competition. And I think that's obviously a testament to, I don't even want to say the months, the years of work that go into that. I think a lot of people don't realize within bodybuilding, unless you're a complete genetic outlier, it's not a season or 2 that gets you to that point. It's years and usually decades of work. And, anybody who has seen you train knows, like, as you kind of alluded to, like your level of intensity is through the roof. There was one time, I like telling this story. It's somewhat self-deprecating, but it's also a compliment to you. We were leg pressing at the same time and you ended up working in. And I had this moment where my like down set was the same as your top set. And I was like, I'm a little bitch. Like, this is not good for me. I clearly need to work harder. But I think it's cool because you see that level of effort in the weight room, in the kitchen, etc., results in somebody that walks out on stage and it's fucking knockout.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really impressive, the work that goes into it, and I find like one theme that comes up anytime that we talk with folks who are in the bodybuilding world is how, of all of the endurance sports, bodybuilding is, I think, the most, like it is I mean, it's not a traditional endurance sport in that sense, but if you think about the actual length of time it takes to be competitive, there isn't really another sport, I think, that necessarily, I wouldn't say that comes close, but I think it's definitely up there if you consider the length of time it takes to be competitive.
Yeah, because there's a solid, I mean, I would say probably the last 6 weeks of it are the most grueling. And when you get to that point, it's like the finish line is so far away and you have to mentally drag through that. It's not like a race or anything else where the timer is on and you only have to stay in it for X amount of time. It's dreadful and it's grueling. And I don't think a lot of people who are like stage lean and ready know how hard that part of a prep is.
We actually, so we recorded our sort of roundtable podcast just before this. And something we had talked about was having conversations with prep clients about what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that I had brought up is like, no matter how well you manage your prep timeline, fatigue, whatever, like there's a point where like it just kind of feels bad.
Kinda, a lot,
Yeah.
a lot.
So I am curious whether it's like, you know, maybe what kind of conversations do you have with clients, either preparing them for that and then managing that? And I'm also curious yourself, because you're as much an athlete as you are a coach, what kinds of experiences do you go through, especially in the later stages of prep? And then how do you manage those feelings?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of prepping clients for doing their first competition, because that's when you have no idea how it's really going to feel. I mean, I give them a fair warning that it's going to be really difficult, especially the last little bit when you're pushing. But I kind of give them a heads up of like, you need to make sure that life around you is as perfect and stable as it can possibly be. Like, your relationship needs to be on point. Your communication with your partner needs to be there, because you're going to have days where you wake up more often than not on the wrong side of the bed, and that communication needs to be there to make sure that your relationship doesn't go in the shitter.
The number of breakups that I've heard of in prep is astronomical.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that
Oh, yeah.
surprising, but that's interesting that.
Yeah. It's either like during the prep, which will make your show terrible because of the stress that is going to come with that, or right after, which hell, that may even be worse because of the post show like blues and down that you feel after, tying a breakup with that. Going to be brutal. But yeah, and work as well. So just making sure that you're in a good spot and like you have good systems in place to be able to step back from work if you need to, or whatever, just making sure that that's kind of taken care of, financially too. But
Bodybuilding's an expensive sport. I don't think people realize that always.
I was doing the math because I was just curious about like my last show, and for the like a year of coaching and then the show expenses, it was just slightly over 10 grand with everything included.
That's like cheaper than I would have expected, to be honest.
Yeah, but yeah. What was I saying? Prepping clients
Prepping
for
difficulties and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and just so letting them know too, like you're going to have very fatigued days. Like, you're not going to want to get out of bed or walk. You may feel lightheaded, but also giving them that caveat of like, if something doesn't feel right, you need to let me know, because there are instances where something serious could be happening, or maybe you do need a little bit of food. I don't want you to pass out, like all of that.
Right.
And keeping that line of communication open. Because like there was one, I shouldn't say one day, there was a few days towards the end of my prep where I was like hanging on to the kitchen counter because I was so lightheaded. I felt so weak and like I could barely hold myself up or stand up. And mornings that I would just wake up at 4 a.m. with like my heart racing. And it's like, yeah, this is what it takes to get stage lean conditioned.
For your athletes, does it ever come up where you need to like have a conversation where you challenge what they view as being healthy when it comes to like a sustainable or a maintainable amount of body composition? Or do you find that perhaps people's understanding, that this is something that Ryan and I talk about all the time, and we talked about it actually on the podcast we recorded earlier today, that like there's a huge difference between, you know, the level of condition that you need to be on the stage and perhaps what would be a healthy amount of leanness, or even a kind of like a sustainable amount. Do you find that like people's appreciation for the unhealthiness of stage leanness, do you think, do you find that that's becoming increasingly more kind of widely understood, or is that something that you still push up against on a kind of semi-regular basis with with your folks? I'm assuming new athletes, but I'd be curious to hear
Yeah.
that from your stance.
I think it's pretty well understood. Like I don't really have anyone coming to me saying or like sending me a photo of me being stage lean and being like, I want to look like this.
All
Right.
the time.
It's not really the ideal look. Like I actually don't like looking like that. I would rather have a little bit more body fat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Partly because I also feel like absolute shit when I'm that lean
Yeah.
too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, like a big education piece comes into that because all women are different too. Like there may be one female who is able to get to that level of body fat and feel okay and still be sleeping well and have a normal menstrual cycle, whereas another female may get to that level of body fat and start losing her cycle, have like insane cravings and not able to adhere to her nutrition, and her training is crap and it just isn't maintainable for her and it's not healthy. And that's like a big education piece that just needs to come in. But understanding the biofeedback and internal health, that is so much more important than what you look like physically and externally. And I think as
Can
as
we,
as females go through that too, and
yeah.
when they see like how they feel when they get to that body composition, they're like, oh, maybe I actually don't really want this because I don't feel good.
Right.
As we talk about coaching, female athletes specifically, I had seen that you'd made this post, which I loved because it's a phrase that I've heard before, but it's this idea that women are not small men.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some unique challenges and considerations when it comes to coaching women. There's certain physiology and mechanics that are obviously similar, but there are enough distinct differences that approaches should be different.
Yeah,
In your
for sure.
experience, in your opinion, what are some of the major considerations that you need to have when you're coaching, let's say specifically female competitors,
Mm-hmm.
that you would need to take into account versus like a male competitor?
Um, are we talking prep clients, like someone going through a
Sure. So we'll,
bodybuilding?
we'll talk about specifically like any competitor, whether it be off season
Mm-hmm.
or contest prep.
Right. So, I mean, let's say in season females, again, depending on the female, some may be able to keep their menstrual cycle through the whole prep, which is great. They're genetically gifted and can tolerate stress really well if you're able to keep your period, whereas other women are bound to lose it. And I think that's a consideration for sure to understand that post show, the main goal is getting that cycle back, putting on body fat as to a healthy point as fast as possible so that we can get this female back in a healthy position. Um, Off season, I think it's mainly nutrition related with differences that are going to happen. On the training side, depending on the female, she may have more heightened PMS symptoms. So having that open communication of understanding what she's dealing with, if she gets really bloated or notices that strength goes down, making those training considerations to possibly pull back training slightly, keeping RPE the same, but knowing that she may need to pull back loads a little bit.
Right.
She may need a little bit more recovery time. Possibly looking at like more deloads if needed. Again, just kind of like being wary with that. We don't want to program a deload every 4 weeks for this female, but just having that understanding. And a lot of females, I find sometimes giving them like a couple high days or some refeeds around either ovulation or their period helps a ton with bringing down stress, helping with cravings, and we see a more linear drop in weight by applying those high days and those refeeds. And it all really comes down to the stress management that comes with those.
Would you typically have proportionally higher fat intake for female clients then?
Yeah. So with with prepping, I try to keep those fats as high as possible for as long as possible, and just like at the very end dropping those down. Like for most, like I'm trying to say like minimum 40, and then maybe the last couple of weeks, if calories need to come from somewhere, they have to come from somewhere. We don't have another choice. So we'll drop that down. But for most females, up at that like 25% of total calories. Men, depending on the guy, anywhere from 20 to 25, but they can be on the lower end.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. One of the things that this is a conversation that Ryan and I had off air, that we were really kind of excited to bring to you to really get your perspective here, is because there really doesn't seem to be necessarily a consensus with regards to how one should handle training women when it comes to like organizing their training around their cycle and their period. And so, perhaps that would be, I'd love to maybe just kind of pull on that thread a little bit more to kind of see like just generally, how do you think about that? But you mentioned something that I thought was really interesting that I think could go unnoticed if we don't circle back to it, which is you were like, yeah, we kind of like manage our expectations about how their training performance might manifest, but we keep our PE the same. And I think that could go unnoticed, because what you're talking about there is you're keeping effort the same.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that as one's performance waxes and wanes during a month and during a year, that it's like, yeah, we manage our expectations with regards to the external outcome of performance, but we control the controllable in a way, which is like, you still need to show up. And so I'd be curious to kind of like maybe just kind of hear you elaborate on the importance of that, and maybe why it is perhaps not the best strategy, and correct me if I'm wrong, to just kind of take it easy during those periods, pun intended.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't want to just take it easy and slack off and like give yourself the grace. This is for elite athletes. For someone who just wants to generally stay healthy,
good distinction,
by all means, but we're talking like more elite athletes whose goal is to put on muscle mass. If you take off 4-5 sessions around your cycle every single month, that's how many sessions? Yeah, that's a quarter of your sessions per month, a quarter of the year that you are not pushing intensity and effort and getting the maximum out of your training. So like I said, like keeping RPE the same, so you're still pushing hard and pushing effort. Maybe we're pulling back, instead of going to 0 to 1 reps in reserve, maybe we're at 2 to 3, but we're still getting those 2 or 3 effective reps there. So you're still getting lots out of your training session. But maybe we're just taking off a little bit of load and going for some higher rep ranges, or doing some like intensifiers and cluster sets, so that you can spend a little bit more time under less total load, less risk of injury, but you're still getting that stimulus.
And then am I wrong in understanding that, of course, here we're talking about kind of more elite athletes in the bodybuilding world specifically. Am I right in assuming that if you had a client who was working with you because they want to lean out a little bit, they want to gain some muscle, that you would perhaps be a little bit more flexible with regards to whether or not you would push intensity as much during like the challenging moments of their cycle?
Yeah, I would definitely be a little bit more flexible. I would still give them some pushback of like, why don't you go into the gym and just see what you're capable of? I think it is a big mindset piece of like, oh, I feel a certain way, so therefore I'm not going to perform a certain way, where there's really no correlation between your feelings and your performance. Like there's days where I go in, I'm like, I feel like crap. I'm sore. I didn't get a good sleep. Bing, bang, boom. I have a really great session and I PR with multiple things. Right. So just, getting them out of their own head and getting them away from how they feel and just focusing on their performance on the day of. And I think once they're able to do that and get uncomfortable with themselves and with those feelings, they start to become her, right? They start to see what they're actually capable of. And I think that's super empowering, with everything, and translates to everything that you do in your life.
I love that.
I think, I don't know if this would be your experience, Olivia. I've ended up, for some reason, probably working with more women than I have men over most of my career. And I think, like a lot of things, there's this element of auto-regulation and, case by case. Because I've had some, women where they are like literally on bed rest during their period. And then I've had other women where the worst their period gets is like they get some spotting for a day or two.
Yeah.
So there's almost no changes that need to be made, because subjectively, like, they feel completely fine. It's like just another day to them. So I imagine that those are, again, conversations that you're having where, like, as you had said, if someone is bloated and they feel fucking horrible and their back hurts, even just to manage their expectation going into a session, I really like your strategy of maintaining the intensity, but then modifying the load parameters. I don't know if this is intentional, but what I thought of when you said that is, for people who are really logbook focused, it can be really discouraging when you're not in a place to be able to make progress on the logbook. But if you just change what the expectation is, they still walk away feeling like they had a successful training session.
Yeah. Logbook gymnastics, right?
Yeah.
If I've never done this weight before, then it's a PR. So if I've done, like,
If I do it for 17 reps.
yeah, like if I typically do like 6 plates in the leg press, say, but I go down to 4 plates when I'm not feeling great, then anything I do there is a PR technically. So
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, good point.
Right? Just playing mental gymnastics there. But yeah, like, also with females too, because I'm very much like getting into a lot of like functional health with women. A big piece of it, like, is if they are struggling a lot with their PMS symptoms, why? Like, let's get some blood work done. Let's figure out what's going on to fix this, because severe pain like that and issues like that is not normal. I think it's become very normalized with women, but severe bloating, pain, anything like that is there's an underlying issue going on.
Could you actually talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, same.
And like, what, I think we were thinking the same thing, ET.
Yep.
Like, maybe what symptoms to watch out for, and then potentially, if they get blood work done or they seek outside help, maybe what things should they be looking for on blood work? What kind of questions should they be asking?
Well, I think first is like the birth control piece too. A lot of women are on birth control, many not for the reason of birth control, but because doctors have put them on it to mask issues that they were having with their cycle previously. So if a woman comes to me and she says, hey, I want to get off of birth control, it's like, okay, well, why were you on it in the first place? What symptoms did you have beforehand? And knowing that if they are to come off of this, those symptoms are going to come back, right? So why were you having these symptoms in the first place? So, I mean, before coming off of birth control, kind of prepping them for that and setting the foundation for liver health, gut health, stress management, vitamin deficiencies before they transition off of it. And then once they're coming off of it after a couple months, getting some blood work, looking at things like estrogen, progesterone, total free test, prolactin, ferritin, sex hormone binding globulin, DHEAs, right? And that's the kind of birth control piece, but those are also the things that you want to test if you're not on birth control as well. And looking at what's going on there, checking underneath the hood before throwing in supplements. Like, there's a lot of women that come to me and they're like, oh, I've been taking DIM because this person recommended it. It's like, well, why? why are we adding that in? Like, have you gotten any blood work done? What's going on? So just checking on things before throwing a wall of supplements at this female that could potentially make things worse.
Have you found that there's been any like really common perhaps opportunities when it comes to, I believe the words that you used were like the kind of like the functional health of the athlete. Are there any things that you find just tend to come back, and thus by extension that there are some common interventions? Of course, understanding the caveat is that's likely not everyone, but I'm curious if perhaps on average, if there are trends. Have you noticed any?
Like common functional health cases.
Yeah, yeah, and like perhaps
Not
things that are leading to like really, really, really like painful cycles and stuff like that. Does anything come to mind?
I think for the most part, a lot of painful cycles are something like having PCOS and not being diagnosed with it yet. Like that, endometriosis,
Yeah.
endometriosis, like a lot of conditions there. I've had, or I have a client that has struggled with painful periods, constant bleeding for the past 10, 12 years. 12 years of that
Jesus.
much of an effect on her quality of life. And she had just been brushed off by doctor after doctor after doctor. And all it took was for me to kind of ask her the right questions and dive a little bit more into her history for us to come to the conclusion that it is or potentially is a blood clotting disorder. And she has a family history of leukemia. It's like, why didn't any doctor look into this before?
Yeah, it's insane.
So now we're in the steps of getting her to a hematologist and getting some diagnosis and getting that next step. But for years and years, she's been brushed off and brushed off. And I think that happens with a lot of women with their period is, oh, it's just your period. Take some Advil, take some Motrin, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. What a concept. Caring for people is a good idea.
Yeah.
What a concept.
Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks.
On kind of this idea of, women and hormone management, I had reached out to some of my female, in particular, like competitor clients and what they're interested in. And unsurprisingly, a topic that a lot of people are fascinated by is the like performance enhancing drug side of female competition. So how I wanted to kind of frame this question is, when working with enhanced competitors, what kind of approach are we taking? How are we maybe potentially like minimizing virilization? Because that's often like the biggest risk with women. What risks are you willing to accept? And then what kind of things are you looking out for?
Yeah. So, I mean, beforehand, before any female is getting on any performance enhancing drugs, you should absolutely have blood work done just to make sure that you're in a good spot. I always ask females, like, where are you at with your life in terms of wanting to have kids and fertility, and your history with that as well. Like I've had some clients that they've had their kids, they don't want any more, they're good to go. And it's like, okay, so we know that that's not too much of a concern. We obviously still want to manage that thing from a good health perspective. At that, and then with virilization, obviously starting off with the non-androgenic compounds first. And
so not just Anavar right away.
No, absolutely not.
For people that actually don't know what that word is, could you define that just so that way people kind of understand the context for what we're about to dive into?
Anavar or PEDs?
No, virilization.
Oh, it's basically masculine features coming out. So deepening of a voice, hair growth where you don't want it, hair loss where you do want it, acne, things like that.
Got it.
So initially starting off with the non-androgenic things, like let's see how you respond first of all, and then when we decide to introduce it, it's at the minimum effective dose and not jumping right into like 50 to 100 milligram load per week, which is just nuts. And tracking those side effects while you're going through it. So getting a voice pitch app and taking some voice notes and like noting any changes in your voice throughout the cycle that you're on. And the second that you start to notice anything, pull that shit out. Like, get it out of there. Because some females are more receptive to those androgens, and just their androgen receptors are just very sensitive. And that was something that happened with me. Like, after coming off of birth control, I didn't have that education piece. So when you're on birth control, those exogenous hormones are binding to those hormone receptors. And then when you take that out, those receptors they're either like, ooh, shiny, fancy new things, or they're like, we've had enough. We don't want to latch on to anything here. So not having the education, took the birth control out, immediately introduced PEDs, and got virilization side effects like right away. Right. But that was the start of me wanting to dive so much into functional health and women's health, and making sure that the people that I take through this are doing it in the healthiest and safest way possible.
I think for context for, people listening, when we talk about sort of starting dosages, because as we sort of said, I think it's been commonplace where it's like Anavar is the female steroid. And even if people start at 5 milligrams a day, which would almost be a low dose from what some people would start, still a 35 milligram load, androgenic load per week.
Yeah.
And context is typically like TRT for women is like 3 milligrams of testosterone a week. So you are like 12xing that androgenic load by just starting with like your female friendly Anavar.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very common for females to introduce things and go right up to 80 to 100 because that's what someone else did, or that's what they heard that females can tolerate. But it's not everyone, and you're putting yourself at a really big risk if you're jumping up to that. And why not prolong the amount of growth and like what you can get out of these things by slowly tapering it up over the course of your career, or however long you're going to be doing this.
Another common theme, just talking about how like the duration of time is a predictor for success. Like, you can't gain your 30 pounds of muscle over the course of a month. And so, and like there are upper limits to just like the usefulness of these things, right? And looking to balance out, like, how can we push hard enough on a week by week and month by month basis, maximizing that without compromising the long game, and kind of towing that line, I'm sure it sounds quite difficult.
Yeah, because it's like if you double your dose, it doesn't mean you're going to double your size.
Yeah.
Right? And it'll still come back to your training performance, and that's not going to it's not going to outwork your training performance and the things you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
So you said two things that I wanted to kind of bring back up. So when we talk about starting with non-androgenic PEDs, I have maybe certain approaches that I might take, but I'm curious again, like, what would those be? And then the second question I had as well, and you just kind of mentioned it, because I think we've both probably experienced this, where people think that getting on a cycle is this magic. And obviously these things do something, otherwise people would never use them. But I think sometimes people put too much stock in it, and they start to forget the importance of all of the basics, like nutrition, their sleep, their training.
Yeah.
I saw very recently John Jewett in a podcast that talked about the thing that he puts the most amount of effort into right now is making sure that his training performance is as like effective as possible. So, like, maybe what non-virilizing or non-androgenic compounds would you potentially use as like a starting point for somebody? And then could you talk about, again, just like the importance of doubling down on those basics?
Yeah. So I mean, non-viralizing, we're looking at like growth hormone, clenbuterol, injectable L-carnitine, metformin, pairing that with your growth hormone. I mean, you could look at some other peptides, like MOTS-C. There's all these like new ones that are coming out.
That's like the area that is of interest for me of late.
Yeah, I think it's becoming a big shiny new thing. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say new. It obviously had its spotlight many years ago, but it's becoming trendy again.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that are just hard to get your hands on too that work really well. That's a podcast for Paul. He'll give you all the
We
info.
actually we have Dean St. Mart on tomorrow, who he was kind of the guy. So we've done one episode and then we never got to one of the things we wanted to talk about. So we're doing a part 2. For people that don't know, as far as I'm aware, he's kind of the guy that made SLU PP332.
Okay, yeah.
Like really brought it to the forefront. And he had mentioned to us, I think it was off air on our last podcast, but we'll talk about it tomorrow. Mm-hmm. His most recent contest prep, his like peak dose for his cycle was 125 test and 300 primo, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And he ran SLU essentially in the background the whole time. And I think he said he never dropped his calories below 3,000, and he was like shredded on stage. Yeah. And like never saw a decline in his work. So anyway, I think it's definitely an area that's worth further exploration, in particular for competitors.
Yeah, for sure. I want to experiment it with my next prep. And that's something that
you and me both.
I want to experiment with these things, and I want to try them for myself before getting any of my clients. Totally. Just to have my own input and feedback. But so the non-androgenic, like I said, those few, and then testosterone, and making sure that your total test is in a good spot and still in a normal female range, and not super physiological, because there can be a ton of improvement just by bringing your testosterone up a little bit, as well. And then what was point B again?
Like doubling down on things like training, your nutrition, your sleep.
Yeah. So that I look at it this way, and this is what I tell my clients or anyone who asks me for advice with that, is you're taking this compound that has such potential risks to your health, and you're not going to do everything in your power to get the most out of it. What are you doing? Right. And it's like, especially females, we can only take it for such a short period of time. And it ends up being like maybe twice a year, maybe 2.5 if you're kind of pushing things close together. But for 6 to 8 weeks, 2 cycles, so 12 to 16 weeks out of the year, you can like do everything perfectly to get the most out of this thing. You better damn well be doing it, right? Or else you're dicking around and you're not getting anything out of it.
And my favorite phrases, by the way.
Dicking around.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to work magic. And this is the thing that irritates me so much about like social media and people who don't understand how these things work, is they don't work unless you do. And your training has to be on point. Your sleep, your recovery, your nutrition, your stress, like all of those things have to be so well managed to see anything out of it. Like there are so many people who use these compounds and have very average physiques, like very unsuspecting that they would even touch anything. And it's because they're not doing those things.
That's such an important piece to highlight, that it isn't a silver bullet when it comes to progressing with your body composition. Because I can only imagine, because I mean myself, I'm not as involved in the like physique in the physique world as both of you. So, but from my perspective, I can only imagine how people would be like, like I'm struggling, I'm having trouble figuring out how to do all of these things. I'm gonna like just pay money to like make this problem go away.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see why they think that way, because what they probably see are folks who are running PEDs who look incredible and who have the type of physique that they aspire to have. And so perhaps they associate and equate PEDs with the physique. Yet what you're saying is, in a way, if you equate the PEDs, the thing that makes the difference is the boring ass lifestyle shit that everyone's avoiding and no one wants to work on, and people don't want to
Yeah.
prioritize going to bed early because they want to watch
Yeah.
Netflix.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like it's funny, but it's just like it's always the fundamentals,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're like regardless of the sport that we're talking about. It's just the boring
Mm-hmm.
stuff that gets repeated all the time. That's the shit that moves the needle.
Yeah, and someone will see a physique like mine or Ryan's and say, "Oh, well, it's just PEDs," and it's like, no, if you followed me around day to day, you wouldn't be able to keep up. Like you'd be in the dust.
I
And
did have an
if
old guy ask me if I was natty the other day, and I was like, "That's tough. It's tough to hear."
It looks
they're
like
He's
just,
like 75
they're just naive. You're not small.
for sure.
It's funny, when we Ryan and I have known each other for many years, and through teaching together, like to your point where you're talking about like people have no idea how insane your life is. I had no idea. And then we taught a course together in Edmonton, and I'm like, don't want
We
his
traveled
life.
for 11
I'm
days. Yeah.
not interested at all. Like
Yeah.
just not my thing. Not the kind of
Mm-hmm.
suffering that I'm willing to go through. There's a saying from Mark Manson, who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. One of the chapters in his book is not only choosing things that interest you, but choosing things that you're like willing to suffer or to tolerate the shitty parts that come with it. Like actively choose
Mm-hmm.
that. And the way that he calls
Yeah.
it is pick your favorite flavor of shit sandwich, because you're gonna have to eat that shit every day. I
Yeah.
thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But to your point, I really don't think people know the amount of effort and meticulousness and intentionality that comes with that is required for the type of outcomes that you guys get. I really don't think people
Mm-hmm.
do, and I really think that people view the PEDs as being a way out in many ways, when in
Yeah.
reality, like they are not. They simply amplify the
And it's
inputs they
also
are
just
already putting
another
in.
hassle to manage, to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah, you've
It's
talked
something
about
I
that
talk
actually.
about.
Yeah,
It's like a
yeah,
whole other thing that you've got to deal with.
lots of
Travel's
logistics,
a bitch and all of that stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
no doubt.
Yeah.
if anything, I'm sure you feel the same way, Olivia. Again, it's a part of the bodybuilding world, but it just becomes another thing that you've got to deal with, plan for, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and the cost involved in it too, like it gets
Yeah.
pricey. Plus, all like the blood work that you need to do
Yep.
to stay on top of your health as well. Especially for Canadians, like it's hard and a pain in the ass to get blood work done. It's not like the States where you can just call up the concierge service and get your requisition in the next hour and get your blood work done. It's harder when you don't have a family doctor, which is for
Yeah.
most people in Canada
Most of
right
us.
now.
Yeah. So I know we have some. Oh, Brian, what happened to your lighting issue? For a little bit, it looked like you were coming out of a cave there. What happened?
I was going to say it looks like apocalypse now. It's because I'm facing a window and the sun was like half. Anyway,
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
watching myself just go like this.
Yeah.
It was an interesting thing to observe. Yeah.
Well, it's 3 p.m. and the sun is pretty much already setting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leading up to today, like Ryan mentioned, he pulled some of his athletes and getting some questions, and we have some rapid fire questions that we'd like to get to in a moment. But selfishly, I'm going to delay that because I also pulled someone. I told my wife about you. I told my wife about who you are, what you do, and I asked her, I'm like, what questions and curiosities do you have? And she had 3 that
Okay.
I would really, really love to hear what you have to say. And of course, she's really interested as well. So the first that she asked was, have there been any stereotypes or glass ceilings that you've had to work through throughout your career, specifically as a female coach in the training world?
Stereotypes as a female coach. Yeah, there was a lot of self-doubt for sure when I initially started coaching athletes. And I think that's just because like there's no big female coaches and names in the industry. Like you see all these elite athletes, whether it's in bodybuilding, weightlifting, powerlifting, and their coaches are males. And
Yeah.
anytime that I had a client leave me, they left me for a male. And it was disheartening for sure initially. But now I'm at a point in my career where I know that it's not a me issue. It's not a knowledge or an expertise issue on my part. The client may just want to try something new or whatever. But yeah, I think more so just like self-doubt as a female coach. I'm not really sure about stereotypes. I think in general, the stereotype is just that females aren't as smart as men and don't have as much of a voice or a say. And there's some other female coaches, like my mentors are all females. So my functional health mentors, my training mentor, Dr. Danny LaMartina, she is one of the smartest people
awesome.
that I know. And Meredith and Sarah, who do my functional health, like they're the smartest people that I know. And no one knows about them, or they just don't have as big of a voice. Is it because they're female?
I'm working on getting Danny on here at some point.
Yeah, you mentioned that as well. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. It's always like a self-doubt and thought in the back of my head, but you just have to kind of remind myself that I'm a boss bitch and females are taking over the world.
Be her. Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it also helps with Samson Dowda
his
and
wife.
Keon Pearson. Like both of their wives coach them, like Olympian athletes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
That was big for females, I think.
I agree.
One of my clients, you mentioned like being kind of like, I think timid was the word I think that you used, if I remember correctly. Just kind of like perhaps like being a little bit more reserved. One of my clients has a Post-it note on her computer and it says, "Be that bitch." Yeah. Where like when she notices there's like a distinct feeling, like a constriction that she feels in her throat and like kind of like along the midline when she's like diminishing who she is and not saying what she 100%. And so like that's her reminder. Like the cue is this sensation in her throat, and then the response is like you read that damn Post-it note and you let it rip. And
let it rip.
It's an ongoing practice.
Say it with your chest and be proud of it.
Hell yeah. I love that.
I'm only going to interject briefly before you get to the next question.
Sure.
I think your answer is really fascinating. We've never really spoken much at all, but my perception of you has always been, I'm like, oh, like she's a badass bitch. Like she's crazy strong. Like, obviously successful bodybuilder, like doing really well as a coach. So there's this outside perception where I'm like this girl is kicking total ass. Mm-hmm. And then there's this human element where internally there's still those like self-doubts, imposter syndrome, etc. And I think it's interesting to hear that where, our perception of somebody might not parallel how they necessarily feel about themselves the same. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm human. I still struggle with those things just like anyone else. And I was saying this to Paul the other day too, because I was having a moment, and everyone says like surround yourself with people who are smarter than you and more successful and all this and that. And it's like, but no one talks about how fucking inadequate you feel when you do that. Yeah. Right. When everyone around you knows more than you and is doing better than you, it's like, I'm not up to their level yet, but at the same time, it's motivation and inspiration for sure.
Yeah. So I have two follow-up thoughts. The first is I totally relate to I mean, not only just the insecurity and imposter syndrome, like for me, like I've had so many mental health challenges, and like periods of my life that have been really difficult. And I'll go and I'll teach a course. People are like, that was amazing. And like, let's say I'll be in contact with that person a year later. And I'm like, that was like quite literally the darkest chapter of my life. And they're like, I had no idea. And I thought it was written all over my physiology and
Yeah.
people had no idea. But you'd mentioned two things I want to circle back to, and I'm going to say them before I forget. The first had to do with like, you just need to kind of know how to like face that stuff. You struggle, you need to find a way forward. And I'd be curious to know for you, what does that look like internally, like in your head when you're moving through the muck? How do you do that practically for you? And then the second question before I forget, and I forgot it. So we'll go with that first one and hopefully it'll
come back to you.
This is why I have Post-it notes everywhere. So if ever you see me, right, it's because of that. And I made the mistake of not writing down my second question. So how do you move forward when you're kind of moving through those hard moments?
Hard moments like the self-doubt or not okay. Reminding myself that I am a badass. Reminding myself of what I have accomplished so far. I think back to like with my business, like where I was a couple years ago and how far I have come in such a short period of time. I save a lot of messages from my clients when they send me little like, you're the best, appreciate you, all those little love notes that sometimes like unsolicited testimonials. I save those and I just reflect back on those and remind myself of the impact that I am making on so many people's life. Right?
Cool.
That slowly starts to wring me out of it.
I love that. Ryan, did you have a follow-up question on that, or can we move to the second question from the boss? All right.
Yeah.
So the second question that my wife had for you was, she's curious about, so she asked, the strength that you've cultivated in bodybuilding. Have you noticed other aspects or areas of your life where you've been able to leverage that strength? And here, I think she's talking like more about perhaps like the inner strength that comes from that process. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So I actually put a lot of thought into the question of like, when people ask like, what did you learn about yourself, or like, what's your biggest tip going through a prep? And really it's like, everyone says that cliche thing of, oh, I learned so much about myself. But then as soon as prep is done and the lights fade and everything is over with, those lessons are nowhere to be found. Right. And being able to take those lessons forward to apply them to your life day to day is going to make you a better person and more successful, whatever. But like a big thing for me, and like one of my whys of why I prep and why I do bodybuilding, is because of that fire that I get when I do something that I didn't think I could do, essentially, right? Finishing tasks when that's the last thing that I want to do, when I'm tired and don't want to do it. It's helped me grow my business in my off season when I have the brain energy to do so. And yeah, I mean, just taking that like resilience and fortitude forward with everything that I do.
Love that. And I guess the third question that she had for you, which kind of ties in nicely to this, is it seems like it's a common occurrence for women to sometimes just not feel safe, or perhaps for there to be like a felt sense of vulnerability. Have you found that, I mean, did that apply to you, or has that applied to you throughout day-to-day life, this like perhaps the general feeling of like not feeling safe in society? And so I guess that would be the first part of the question 3A. And then 3B would be, have you noticed any positive effects kind of flowing outwards from your training and bodybuilding, perhaps maybe even earlier when you were doing CrossFit or running? I'm not sure. Have you noticed any positive effects when it comes to your felt feeling of safety or a lack of vulnerability flowing outwards from your training background?
Yeah, I mean, I think I generally feel pretty safe because I know I can put up a good fight because I am strong enough. I will kick the shit out of anyone who tries
I think if you literally kicked somebody, they're going to break.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's still a part of me too, but it's more so brought up by seeing all these like little things over social media of things happening to women. It hasn't really hit close to home for me, so it's not like a forefront of my mind. But there's still part of me that's like, maybe I should take some self-defense classes just so I know I can fuck someone up. But there's actually something funny. When I'm prepping, I know that I'm getting really lean when I start to get extra looks from men and starting to like I'll be in a gas station just going to whatever, and someone will like follow me. And that sort of stuff begins to happen when I start to get like leaner and people can like see my physique, because it's like, oh, that's their way in to talk to me. And then they start saying things and saying really, I don't know, just like uncomfortable things. And I don't want any of it. So this is the shitty part. It's like, I just start throwing on like baggy clothes. I don't want to show my physique in public because I don't want to welcome that unwanted attention from men, which is, it's unfortunate for women to have to do that, because it's like I work so hard with my physique and I'm scared to show it in public because I don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, hell, this could be...
Ryan, where'd you go, brother?
I know. The sun is back. I apologize. There we go. I'm also blinded right now.
That's so funny.
I'm staring directly into it. I know not to face this way if we do an afternoon podcast.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you brought up there, like in and of itself, could be a whole conversation. And I think is actually a really worthwhile thing to discuss. And I wanted to say sort of two examples of conversations that I've had, because I don't think that that's an uncommon experience. Mm-hmm. So my partner, Shannon, who also competes, interestingly, the comments that she gets are not from men, but she gets a lot from women, typically like middle-aged women. Mm-hmm. And this was something we had noted her last prep, how entitled people feel to make comments about your body as a female, kind of from anybody. You know, she'd get a lot of people who would tell her, they're like, oh, I don't want to look like you, or things like that. In a way that I have never experienced in a prep. People come up to you and are like, oh, it's so cool. Like, you got pec striations and all this stuff. You only get positive compliments as a male when you're prepping. And she would get disproportionately negative comments as a female. And then the second thing I think is, you know, I think ET and I might have talked about this just briefly before we got on the call. I had discussed this with one of my female clients who's also a competitor, and she works as a practitioner. And the like learned behavior that I think a lot of women end up having to navigate a lot of those uncomfortable situations with men. And I will say men typically, where there's almost like you make yourself small to make space for people. Mm-hmm. And there's like this learned politeness or silliness where you're like, haha, and you just kind of play it off. Yeah. And that was, so she and I have had these conversations, and I sort of knew it intellectually, but it was fascinating to hear just how frequently she's faced with those situations. And it's something that I think is worth touching on, because I think, A, I don't think it's right, but B, I think bringing to light those types of interactions that people have, and discussing, you know, A, how they might be inappropriate, and then also like ways of navigating. A phrase that I really like is like not making yourself small to give space to other people. Like, take up fucking room. Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
Take up room and show that you're confident. Because if you show that you're weak, it just gives them more room to push further.
Totally.
Yeah. In my last prep, I got into the habit of like, I was so over it. I would just
if there's one phrase to sum up contest prep, it's that I'm so over it.
Yeah. I would just like if someone said something, I'd just like straight face and I'd be like, okay, or like don't talk to me, or just make an ugly face. If I find someone staring at me for too long, I'll just give them the death eyes, or like make a stupid face at them, and they'll look away.
Can you give us a sample of death eyes and stupid face? Nice. Is that death eyes or
that's the death stare. That's the death stare. Or I'll just do this.
Okay, nice.
I like it.
I'm a big fan of the death eyes. I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
So someone sees that, they're like, okay, never mind.
She's gonna kill me.
Yeah.
Ryan, how do you feel about digging into our rapid fires? What do you say?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. All right.
So we have a series of rapid fire questions that we do with every guest the first time that they come on.
Okay.
So first thing that pops in your head, a variety of questions, personal, professional, etc. So our first question is, what is your favorite book, movie, and concert?
Oh my God. I'm that person that doesn't have favorites. Book. Can it be like a fiction book? I feel like I'm like entitled to say that it was. Where's my book?
Is it Fourth Wing?
Is it smut?
No.
Please. I can't wait for someone to come on here and their favorite book is a smut book.
My
If we ever
favorite.
bring Shannon on, that will be the case.
Yeah,
My
or
favorite-
my wife. Yeah.
My favorite that I just read was called The Women by Kristen Hanna. That was really good.
Okay.
Favorite movie? I'll just say Mean Girls. That's probably the movie that I've seen the most.
Cool.
Favorite concert? Mac Miller, but like way back in the day before he was big. It was like just like a little room of people. That was really cool.
Nice. Favorite and least favorite food?
Favorite? Burgers. Least favorite? Can it be like an ingredient?
Yeah, sure.
Licorice.
Okay.
That's not an ingredient. I was going to say olives, but I've grown to like olives, so licorice.
I thought you might say mustard because every bodybuilder has mustard.
As a favorite or as least favorite?
No, least favorite. I hate mustard.
Oh, I like
And
mustard.
like every bodybuilder puts it on. Yeah, see.
I'll just
outlier,
like
I think.
take cold chicken and just put mustard on it and eat it as a snack.
Couldn't be me. What is your proudest moment outside of business?
Proudest moment outside of business? Winning. It's a tie between like winning my pro card and marrying Paul.
Good answer.
Nice.
Favorite athlete growing up? I'm curious as a hockey player.
For some reason, I really liked Brian McCabe.
Okay.
Do you even know who that is?
I'm a huge hockey guy, so yes.
From the Leafs, and then kind of getting into my competitive career and like fitness and CrossFit, it was Tia Claire, and I think she's probably still my favorite.
She's a machine.
Cool.
What 3 values guide you?
3 values. Morality. Is that a value? I don't even know what values are. Morality. So sticking to my morals. I don't know. What are some examples of values?
Like, integrity, honesty, for example.
Okay.
I think sticking to
Integrity?
your values would be integrity for sure. That's our
Yeah, I would agree with
or
that.
sticking to your
Yeah.
morals, excuse me, would be integrity. Yeah.
Okay, so I went from 2 back down to 1.
It's okay. We'll give you 2. We'll give you 2.
Yeah.
Fuck. Paul and I were just talking about this. We have some values in our relationship, and I think maybe that. So our values
Yeah, that's great.
in our relationship are supportive, fulfilling, and safe.
Beautiful. That's a great answer.
That combines my third one.
I feel like supportive and safe for sure. Those are some words that stand out. I find just qualities that I'm sure you bring to the table as a coach. I'm sure they aren't limited to your relationship, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Your favorite and least favorite lift?
My favorite, are we talking like any lift or like squat,
Any
bench,
lift.
deadlift?
Anything.
Favorite would probably be leg press.
Okay. I'm in the same boat right now, at least.
Yeah. I was gonna say hip thrust, but it's just not hard enough for me. Like I still wanna hate myself a little bit. Least favorite.
That's how you know someone's really a bodybuilder.
Yeah. Least favorite, bench press.
What is one misconception about you?
That I am mean. Some people
It's a common one on this podcast.
Yeah,
We've had a few times.
Yeah, I think I just have my natural face, and if no one's talked to me before, they don't know that I'm actually a really nice person.
Yeah. I can see how if you're like you're focused and doing your thing, you're not there to necessarily socialize. You're there to like work, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
And so
It's my like hour, 2 hours in a day that I'm like detached from work, and I just want to like do my thing and train hard. And sometimes my face doesn't look welcoming.
City or country that you would love to visit?
Croatia is next on my bucket list.
Nice. And our final question is, what is one hard truth that trainers or coaches who are trying to grow their business need to hear?
That your business is not going to grow from like advertising on social media or your outward appearance. You're going to get the best clients and the best retention from actually servicing your clients and getting referrals. And once you're in it for like a longer game, that's when the referrals will start to generate and come, and you'll start to not even need to like advertise on social media, but just nourish your clients that you have and keep them for a long time.
It's a great answer.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And I know the three of us absolutely feel the same way about that. It's been so fun getting to know you today. I'm really happy. We had Paul on here, and he, just so you know, actually, if we're talking about proudest accomplishment outside of business, Paul also said marrying you. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, if she doesn't say it, I'm gonna say something, and but you did. So I think it sounds like you guys are in a good place.
Okay, I'm going to actually take this as an opportunity to share this story. I think you and everyone will find funny. Not quite related, but close. So we had watched, I don't know, we watched a lot of movies at home. I can't remember what the first movie was, but it was some kind of revenge thing. And I had explained where I was like, if anybody ever touched you, like, I would light the fucking world on fire. Like, I don't care what happens. We had then watched the movie Salt with Angelina Jolie, which I don't know if you guys have seen, but it's like the same plot, except she's avenging her husband's death and whatnot. So we're about halfway through the movie, and I turn to Shannon and I go, if that happened to me, like, would you avenge my death? She goes, no. I'm like, what? She goes, be really sad, but I'm probably not going to do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn. All right, fair enough.
It's not reciprocated.
That's so funny. And
So
knowing
I
you guys
learned something that day.
That's really funny. Important to be aligned on certain things, and other things are just kind of fluff, I guess.
Yeah.
Like avenging death.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was getting at earlier, I think that like it's been really fun, genuinely getting to know you, and I'm really happy that we had Paul on here, and that he was like, you need to talk to Olivia, and I'm really happy that we made that happen. And thank you for coming on today and for making the adjustment. I know we were supposed to chat last week, but due to kind of like scheduling mishaps and stuff on my end, we had to change it. So I really appreciate your flexibility. I got a lot out of today, and I'm sure that our listeners did as well. For those that want to perhaps learn more about you, follow your journey, or perhaps be coached by you, where could they do that?
On either my Instagram, so at Olivia Oneid, or our website, www.masterathletic.com. And that's where you'll find like me, Paul, and the other coaches that work on our team.
Fantastic. Ryan, any closing thoughts?
Just that I apologize for the lighting during this episode. Been disappearing and coming back repeatedly.
It's so funny, right? Just because like the black background and your black shirt and your white body meant that you would just either be very visible or completely invisible.
Yeah.
It was really funny.
A lesson was learned today, that's for sure.
Good times. Once again, Olivia, thank you so much for today.
Yeah.
Genuinely really grateful for your presence and for everything that you shared with us today. And I look forward to meeting you in person the next time that I'm in Ottawa.
Of course.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. This was a really good chat, and I'm glad that we were able to make it happen.
Yeah.
Sweet.
As are we. Till next time. Have a nice day.
Okay. Bye.
Ciao.